Hey everyone, so today we are going to be comparing two popular vertical gardening systems, the GreenStalk, which is on the left, and the Garden Tower 2, which is on the right. Now, I've already done separate initial review videos for both, so I'll provide links for those in case you're more interested on a more in-depth review of each one of these systems individually. But today, we're going to actually compare the two and show the differences. So in case you're on the fence or just trying to decide which one you want to go with, hopefully this video can help you with that. As a reminder, I do have chapters set up so you can jump to the section you're most interested in or the most specific difference that you want to compare between. All right, so let's get started. Let's start with the first one, which is kind of their design and their capacity. So the GreenStalk on the left is 55 inches tall and 19 inches wide. They come in a 7-tier and a 5-tier. We're only going to be talking about the 5-tier today since that's the one I have right here. And on the right, you see the Garden Tower 2 is clearly a bit shorter, which is 43 inches tall and 24.5 inches wide. So something to consider there. They are taller, and I noticed that because they're taller and narrower, I can kind of shake them a little bit easier. Look at me, just one finger. Never had one fall before, but just something to think about. Whereas I do find this one to be much sturdier. Yes, this is moving, but overall the entire unit is not moving. Now going on with the design, they're both vertical gardening system. The GreenStalk is more of a true traditional tiered system where you have each one of these layers or tiers. They literally can be picked up just like this, right? You can pick them up. Each tier has the soil in each one encompassed there, and that's kind of how they stack on top. Whereas the Garden Tower 2 is literally a column of soil. Those pieces that you see on the right are just rings, and you literally fill the entire center with soil. Now the difference between the two, and we'll go into more detail in a little bit, but the difference between the two is how they choose to use that center section. For the GreenStalk on the left, they chose the proprietary watering system, which we'll go into more detail in a little bit, whereas the Garden Tower 2 chose to have a composting tower in the middle. Now, a few things to note. The GreenStalk here, by default, it just comes with the tower. This support system, along with this bottom black tray, which allows me to spin the GreenStalk, those are add-on accessories. Whereas the Garden Tower 2 does come with a built-in spinner. So everything, this is a standard system without any accessories here. But on the note of accessories, I've noticed that the accessories are more plentiful with the GreenStalk. You have the support system that we have here, which allows for plants to kind of hold on to if you have vines or if you have heavier plants that might need some, additional support. That support system is really great. They have the spinners. They both have wheels that you can add on, so you can push them around if you know that you're going to have some nice area where you can roll them from one area to another. What I do like, though, is that the GreenStalk has a little bit more affordable accessories. They usually range between around, I think, $20 to maybe $40 for an accessory. So, the spinner is one cost, the support system is another one. So you can kind of choose how you want to configure it. Whereas the Garden Tower 2, the wheels are $120 just for the wheels, and they don't really have other options outside of that. So that's something to think about. Do you need those added accessories, and is it worth the cost to you? One last thing before I forget, the GreenStalk does have a different capacity versus the Garden Tower. So the GreenStalk, since I let the 5-tier system, can hold 30 plants, whereas the Garden Tower 2 can hold around 50. The pockets are a little bit different in size, and I'll show that to you really quick. As you can see, these pockets are much larger. Here's an open one compared to the garden tower pocket size. But something to think about: do you need the larger pocket sizes, or do you want more pockets, right, in a smaller area? All right, let's move on to the second thing, the watering system. So I've already shared very briefly earlier that the GreenStalk has a proprietary watering system. And what that means is you fill up the water on the top, and there's a hole right here, along with all these little tiny holes on the side, where as you fill up, a bunch of water goes down this hole, and it goes down to, you can see, that gray tray right there. And each layer in between will have those gray trays, which is a very similar design to this. It fills up again so that it can water the tier underneath, and then has this hole higher up so that it can move on to that next layer, which is fantastic because traditionally when you're watering from the top, you kind of have to overwater the top, slowly let it, drain down to the bottom. Whereas in this system, it kind of moves down much faster, so you don't feel like you have to waterlog the top. On the garden tower 2, you do have to do the traditional watering over the top. You can, of course, water over the sides. The one thing I do like to note is that unlike the GreenStalk, where it just drains out the bottom or the side, the garden tower has this basin that allows you to fill up. And this is really great because if you have or if you want to put this indoor, you wouldn't have it leaking all over the floor or have another way to capture it. So technically you could put this indoors if you want to. Of course, you can definitely overwater and it spill out, but that's with any potted plant that you would have indoors. But at least there's a way to capture it, so you have some room for error there. All right. Moving on to the composting. So there actually isn't anything you can do for composting on the GreenStalk, so I'll just kind of talk about it on the garden tower 2. The center is where the compost tower is, and this is where I put all my worms in there to start eating up all the food, and you see I have a tomato in there for them. The idea is that down the middle is a massive tube, and that's where the worms will eat the kitchen scraps, and then they'll create worm castings, which is pretty much worm poop and fertilizer for your plants. And the idea is that, one of the challenges of vertical gardening systems is that you have to replace the soil because the soil is going to slowly run out of nutrients for the plants, or you have to amend them in some way. So what I'm hoping for is that by having the garden tower 2 have the worm composting system, not only are the worms going to provide the fertilizer, but they'll also aerate the soil by just digging through it. So these are some of the benefits of having that compost tower in the middle. Ideally, when you have it long enough, it's supposed to create enough compost that you can actually harvest them. I'm not going to actually pull out this lever, but this is actually a filter where when I pull it out, the middle portion of that tower that I showed you will drop the castings down. So that's one way of harvesting your castings. And then you can, of course, top dress around the garden tower or your other plants. The other thing, too, is as you're watering, when I mentioned earlier, the water will drip through. It'll drip through those castings. So in a way, some of those nutrients, you can pour that liquid back through the system to try and recapture some of those, or again, give it to your other plants. All right, moving on to number 4, mobility. So I mentioned earlier, both have wheels. The garden tower 2 wheels are a bit more expensive. So that's one, of course, option for moving. If you live in an apartment and you have this on your balcony, if you plan on moving and then, or potentially moving, that's something that you want to think about. So Both have wheels where you can wheel them. However, I wanted to note that the GreenStalk, I showed it earlier. You can just come over here because it's tiered. You can literally lift up the entire system. And when you do that, you can just lift the entire thing one piece at a time from where you have it to where you want to go. So that is one way of doing it. It's a little bit more work, but it's doable. You cannot do that with the garden tower 2, and that's because, I mentioned earlier, it's one whole column. You can't lift up one tier after another. So for the GreenStalk, you could get the wheels. I chose not to because I can just do that. The garden tower 2, I had to make sure that this is the final place, because if you're going to move it, you're pretty much disassembling the whole thing, including removing all the soil, and then rebuilding it wherever you want it to go to. All right, and number 5 on the list, cost and value. So the GreenStalk starts at $149, and the garden tower 2 starts at $499. So there's a very big difference in price. Now, they both do go on sale quite frequently, but even at going on sale, I think I've seen the GreenStalk go as low as around $100, and the garden tower 2 around $350. You're still talking about close to, actually around 3 times the price. Now, to be fair, I don't think I mentioned the amount of plants that they can hold. The GreenStalk can hold, in the 5-tier system, 30 plants, one in each pocket, whereas the garden tower 2 can hold 50 plants. So that is something to take into consideration. But really, when it comes to the value and the cost, you have to think about, well, how many plants do I want? Do I need some of these accessories that the GreenStalk provides or the garden tower provides? Are you already looking for a vermicomposting system? Because I feel like that's kind of the allure there. But yeah, there is definitely a very big price difference between the two. All right, moving on to my final thoughts here. So both are awesome systems, which is why I purchased them both. I hope this comparison kind of helps you make a decision on what is right for you. It's a little early to say, hey, like a final recommendation, but I think there are a few things that are top of mind for me, which is, again, how many plants do you plan on having? There is a huge price difference between the two. You can get 2 GreenStalks for about the price of a garden tower, or maybe even 3 GreenStalks, depending on the accessories you want, for the price of a garden tower. So that's something to think about there. If you're trying to maximize space and price is not price is not something that you're worried about as much, then the garden tower may make sense more because it can fit more plants in a smaller area, along with the multi-purpose of the composting for sure. For me, my initial thoughts about this is that the GreenStalk is a fantastic value. I do love the idea of the garden tower though, because I'm a little bit of a lazy gardener, so I don't want to change out that soil. I want to just keep putting stuff in, and I don't want to take stuff I don't want to take out the soil and have to add new soil or add new fertilizer. So I'm going to be experimenting with this to see how much easier the garden tower 2 truly is, and as time goes on, I will definitely provide more updates. So if you learned something new or enjoyed this video, please comment or like it. Your feedback helps me understand what content you enjoy and guides future videos. I plan to make videos in the future with updates on my experiences with vertical gardening systems such as these 2. And if you're interested, subscribe to my channel to get updates on when those are released. Thanks, everyone.